Pretending to save my life was ingenious. But ingenuity requires a constant stream of new ideas. Yours seem to have dried up.
Ready when you are.
Salamander. Best not mess with that man, Salamander. When it comes to Bond villains, he's no Telly Savalas. Sounds about as Mexican as Speedy Gonzales. Keeps people underground wearing crazy pajamas. He'll send Milton Johns around to break your best china. Salamander, what a slippery wanker. Oh, Salamander. Oh, Salamander.
Tabasco tyrants, Tigellan time loops, and Toby Jones as a troublesome tit. We serve up a round of evil doubles on this 28th I'll Explain Later, the Doctor Who podcast that sees the threads that join the universe together and mends them when they break, with your hosts John West,
Jim Hall,
and Matt Needer. Tonight, Patrick Troughton only lives twice, doubling up as a crazed Mexican, harnessing the power of volcanic eruptions to bedevil humanity with a terminal case of Montezuma's revenge. An all-time high, or just thunderballs? We're assigned to tackle the enemy of the world.
Amy and Rory find their domestic bliss shattered by an annoying man who keeps spouting hair-curlingly wretched attempts at humour while wearing ridiculous clothes. Matt Smith blames hallucinogenic pollen for Amy's choice.
And in 1980, original companion Jacqueline Hill returned to Doctor Who, claiming the show was unrecognisable from the one she left. Certainly her Doctor didn't spend 4 weeks with his face smothered in pricks. We do the bidding of bellowing space cactus, Meglos.
Hi, how you doing? It's November. Welcome to I'll Explain Later.
Hello.
Bang! That was a firework.
That was your little
Amazing
firework.
Yeah.
How you doing, John?
Good, thanks. Tough week at work, but always happy to kick back and discuss 3 copper-bottomed classics.
Get up
from
early
the
on a
firmament.
Saturday to sing hours of Doctor Who before.
What 3 classics we brought you this month? Absolutely top drawer stuff from end to end.
We're kicking off by going all the way back to 2018. Not for Jodie Whittaker's first season, but for The Enemy of the World, which sees Second Doctor and pals landing in Australia in 2018, and they're immediately caught in a web of mayhem and intrigue. This is due to the Doctor's startling resemblance to Salamander, a powerful figure gaining
it is uncanny, isn't it? It is uncanny.
Yeah.
The guy they got to play Salamander is the spit of Patrick Troughton,
It's
isn't
unreal.
So, a James Bond, maybe not pastiche, but certainly it's having some fun with the James Bond genre.
And we are lucky to be watching Enemy of
Indeed.
the World, aren't we? This
Yeah.
was one of the
that's
recently
debatable.
rediscovered.
We were a bit cruel to Web of Fear last time. Well, we just weren't super impressed with
No,
Web of Fear, were
It was
we?
terrible.
But enormously grateful that it's back.
Yes.
Back in the archives.
Yeah, thank you to Philip Morris.
Now, you two guys, I believe, when these 2 stories came back, didn't you go and watch them back to back at the Prince Charles or something?
We did.
Could I ask you, what was your opinion then, watching, God, what would it be, 5 hours or something?
Yes, that was a lot to sit through in the cinema with a number of gentlemen of questionable personal hygiene barricading us in. The Web of Fear sort of had this reputation as a staunch classic of Doctor Who, and we found that very turgid and dull. I had pretty much 0 expectations for Enemy of the World, and I think we were rather charmed by it. Again, I don't know whether that's just because, I think prior to being rediscovered, it was a story with pretty much no reputation.
Well, yeah, it comes midway through the monster season.
And has no
doesn't
monsters.
have any monsters in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it was one many people had expectations for. Although I've got to say, I remember watching the reconstruction of this a long time ago and really quite enjoying it because it was so unlike the rest of the Troughtons that I was sort of used to. Although I think the first time I came across it at all was when they had all the orphaned episodes. It was before DVD. They had those little compilation VHSs of orphaned episodes, so the Troughton years. And I remember watching the one surviving episode, which is episode 3, which is the stuff in the kitchen, which we'll talk about in a bit. But that was like, what on earth? Is it just 6 episodes of this?
Yeah.
So this time round, how did you find it?
I loved it. I thought it was great. I think, so yeah, it carried less of the surprise, I think, that it did first time round for me. And as we always say, it's 6 episodes. You could probably do this in 4. That said, I think it's great. I think it's a David Whittaker script. David Whittaker being a writer that we've had a lot of praise for in the past, because I think he doesn't take anything for granted. He's very details orientated.
And he's been there since the beginning.
And he's been there since the beginning. Was this his final Doctor Who, or did he...
No. I think, there's Ambassadors of Death, which got...
Oh, yes, of course.
Monkeyed around with quite a bit.
Yes.
But, yeah.
No, fair enough. I think David Whittaker is a writer who can take us a fairly stock sci-fi situation, in this case, the sort of dystopian future, and do something, if not necessarily interesting with it, I think certainly detailed and well thought out. And I think he doesn't take anything for granted. I think the thing that really struck me watching it this time round is that I think he's got quite a clear sense of how tyranny works. And I think it's quite interesting watching it, because when was this rediscovered? 2015? I'm trying to think when we would have seen it.
It was the anniversary year, wasn't it?
Oh, that long ago, 2030.
So, yeah.
So, authoritarian, charismatic, strongman politics being a bit of a hot button issue at the minute. It was very strange to watch it in 2017 and realise that for all that it's stock sci-fi in places, Whittaker, I think, has got quite a nuanced understanding of how this kind of tyranny works. That, I think a lesser writer would have portrayed a society suffering under the yoke of a tyrant. Whereas to make Salamander popular and charismatic and very well liked by his people puts more... I was sort of fascinated that the main narrative driver of this is the Doctor trying to find proof in order to change people's minds, as opposed to just simply coming in and toppling an unpopular leader. So, no, I really liked it. It's got its flaws. It's a bit shaky around the edges in parts, and I think it's long and a bit slow in places, but thumbs up from me.
Okay. I think as well, you were talking about the parallels with the political situation now. I thought it was very interesting when he's basically blackmailing Federin. And he's got the dossier, and the Federin says most of it's lies, and Salamander says lies, truth, who knows?
Fake news,
exactly. Yeah. And so even the methods of the sort of demagoguery, and which we see at the supposed sort of United Nations World Summit, whatever it's called, speech, and also the sort of blend of fake news. It's definitely a big sort of Trump I moment.
It really is, yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean that I think this is good television.
Okay.
I've got to say, I did find it somewhat charming when we saw it first. As you said, it didn't really have much of a reputation. Watching it a second time, I know we always say, well, look, it's 6 episodes of television that wasn't necessarily meant to be poured over again and again and again. But after the initial stuff on the beach and the sort of chasing and guns and the helicopter arrives and there's a hovercraft and stuff, all the kind of things that it reminded me a bit of Planet of the Spiders, that sort of sense of money and action.
Barry Lett's first job on the show.
Yeah, and I like the character of Astrid Ferrier, played by, is it?
Mary Peach.
Mary Peach. I knew there was a P in there somewhere. Mary Peach. And yeah, I think she does a very good job. Really good supporting actor in this, actually. But it just doesn't quite hang together for me, as it doesn't. They're trying to play with some of those Bond themes or some of the spy stuff from the 60s, but it's a little bit late to the party for a start, because this is like 67, 68.
Well,
and
go on.
I'm not sure that it's really
It's just, I was going to say, this is right after You Only Live Twice, which we were just talking about Bond films before we started recording.
Favourite.
No, but I think prior to that, this is the fact that this has the volcanoes and the actual world domination kind of plot.
Yeah.
Bond had only really just got to doing that, so
but
prior to that, they're a little more low key. But I suppose it's in the tradition of a lot of other 60s espionage stuff at the time.
Well, the stuff that it really brought to mind for me was kind of Jerry Anderson series at the time.
Yeah, it's probably more.
Which I think is probably... And I mean, those obviously in some ways are riding on a bit of the kind of coattails of the sort of style and pace of the Bond movies. But that idea of the future society and global governance. You know, about 1 in every 3 episodes of Thunderbirds or Captain Scarlet is about a plot to kill the world president, seemingly. That idea of the sort of the global society and the dissolution of nation states, and all of that seems very Gerry Anderson to me. Maybe not, and I think that's why I think if you're looking to make a direct comparison with Bond, it probably comes up lacking, because it doesn't have it's kind of international in scope and ambition, but it doesn't feel it. And
Troughton's bed hopping isn't really up to snuff.
Although there is that very sinister implication of what he's doing to keep a hold over Faria, the food taster. And it's
this is Salamander, not the
this
Doctor.
is Salamander. Sorry, yes. not the Doctor. But she won't quite talk about what she has to do for him, and that there's quite a clear implication that it's probably sexually unsavoury.
Yeah, and I liked the bit where the Doctor asks. No, the Doctor doesn't. Kent. Turns out he's spoilers. He's actually
he's the guy who's actually trying to get
guy.
the Doctor to pose as Salamander.
Yeah,
and sort of
and he actually ends up being.
He's Salamander's rival, but not a good guy.
No,
basically.
But you think he's
Spoilers,
a good guy.
But you think he's a good guy until like the last 10 minutes. I mean, they hold that twist back.
That's well done, I grant you. But they ask the taste. What's her name?
Faria.
Yeah, Faria and Federin.
Yes, really and Astrid Ferrier.
Yeah, it's just too much of those Fs.
And Roger Federer's in it as well.
One of them asks what is Salamander's hold over her, and she says, I don't want to say what it is, and the Doctor says, "Oh, quite right too. You shouldn't have to, But there's something really sinister about that whole setup.
And the fact that it's worth pointing out because it's something of a novelty. She's a major speaking part played by a black actress, and I'm not suggesting that there is necessarily anything. I'm not saying it's trying to say anything by casting her in that role, but there's something.
I don't think you're
there.
overreaching to see that as a thematic.
No,
beat.
exactly.
No, I mean, I think her presence is just to make the whole thing look cosmopolitan, but her character in itself isn't necessarily needed to be played by.
Well, and the way
actress.
she played it, the actress was.
Carmen Munro, wasn't it?
And I think it's also what she brings to it.
She's really good.
Yeah,
you can see wheels turning there for the character, not the actress.
Yeah, no, exactly.
There's all sorts going on in her head,
and a sadness and a weariness, and I think she does a great job with it.
That's to me the really interesting driver of this is that it's. And coming back to what we were saying about the era of not just Trump politics, but sort of Putin politics as well. This idea of these charismatic strongmen who are genuinely, in Trump's case, as well as Putin, loved at least by a certain section of society. The driver of it is the Doctor trying to pin enough detail on these people in order to change, in order to break their popular hold, essentially. So it's not about killing Salamander. It's not about overthrowing him and basically unshackling the slaves or anything. It's about proof and persuasion. And I find it really interesting that the Doctor stays skeptical throughout about everything he's being told about Salamander, about the claims of the groups working against Salamander, and ultimately justifiably so, because Giles Kent reveals himself as a traitor in the final few minutes. It's even down to, it reminded me a bit, looking forward to something like The Untouchables, even in places, that the bit where the Doctor was going through all the paperwork and he found that Salamander had a catering receipt for 30 people, even though there were only 12 people working on the station. And I heard Sean Connery going, "That's how you get Capone," ringing in my ears. At that point, that it's that sort of details oriented. And I think what Whittaker is saying is that in these sort of situations, outrage is not enough. You can't just sit there steaming with moral outrage and expect the world to bend to you. You have to work hard to methodically take these people apart and pin things on them so that their power base is eroded.
Yeah, I mean, The Untouchables was a TV series in the 50s and 60s.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So it's possible that Whittaker was coming more from that thing, and the James Bond stuff's a bit cosmetic, This has a good cast, I think. So
good to see George Pravda again.
Yeah, George
as
Pravda, who,
Dennis.
let's not forget, was in Thunderball not long before this.
Oh, was he? Was he?
Yeah, he's kind of the scientist who's rigging the bomb up, but he's kind of a bit morally neutral. But he's large. I think Connery throws him off the Disco Volante at the end, and we never see any more of him.
Nice. But Dennis is a really good character.
Yeah.
And I felt really sad when he got his basically.
Yeah, because he seems very genial, doesn't he?
Yeah, and smart and modest. Yeah.
When they're keeping him prisoner in the corridor, and Victoria asks if she can come and sit next to him while he's having it. There's something quite strange and farcical about that whole business, about how they're desperate to treat him well because of his rank, but he's just being held prisoner in a corridor. But he's great. But I also, much more sort of stock character in a way, but Donald Bruce as well, who, with his roll neck and his black gloves and everything, playing the archetypal strongman head of security. There's just a way that he's got of talking, which just made me laugh continually throughout.
And of course, his character's interesting as well, because you assume, largely by virtue of the costume, that he's going to be... He looks like one of the bottom inspectors from Viz. You sort of think he's just going to be this sort of...
he's going to be the ideologue.
A1 fascist.
Yes.
It's just like Fascist 101.
Whereas that's the Milton Johns character, Bennick, who is... I mean, that's an amazing performance, I think.
It is.
In terms
definitely not what you see Milton Johns doing normally.
No, Milton Johns is normally your sort of slightly...
obsequious.
Yes, or sort of harassed bureaucrat.
Wikipedia says he specialised in obsequious and oily roles. Well, it probably still does. Sorry, I should stress he is still alive.
I mean, there aren't that many...
Basil Brush's landlord from 2002, 2007, I think.
Did he fall on hard times then? Or?
There aren't that many out-and-out sadists in Doctor Who. I mean, I'm just Peter Miles is usually quite good at doing that kind of thing, as the only other example in Genesis of the Daleks that comes to mind. It's over the top, but it's quite chilling, some of the stuff he's got. When Faria dies and the guard says, "She's dead," and he just looks at the camera and goes, "Good." There's something really nasty about him.
And the fact that he immediately says, "I want a trial, a fair trial."
Oh yeah, he said, "Don't hurt me."
Yeah,
when they catch him. Yeah,
but yeah, he's always got a bit of the look in his eyes, and just there's a smile on his lips when something's happening, and just I love his haircut. I don't know if that was deliberate. That it looks a bit wonky, or whether that was just his normal hair combed down and they couldn't be bothered to straighten it out. But it just makes him look quite
sort of weird bowl cut at the back.
I mean, he can deliver some really sadistic stuff when he goes around and just smashes up Kent's china.
Kent's crockery.
That's pretty mean.
Yeah, there's no need for that. And even the Doctor points out, the pattern on this was really nice.
Well, yeah, it does have that nice line up, people make nice things and other people come and break it.
Yeah.
So.
But the interiors in general are something else in this. There's some extraordinary...
Astrid's house in episode 1 is 60s perfection. I mean, that's ideal home exhibition style, standard.
In a way, that sort of contributes to this phrase that we beat into the ground every single time, but the world building, which it doesn't feel like this is necessarily set in Australia, but pulling all of these different geographic, and then talking about the earthquakes in the Ukraine that are going on at the beginning. There is an attempt, I think, to kind of flesh out what this future society is like, both in terms of geopolitics and lifestyle as well. And I do think, oddly, the sort of interiors contribute to that. There's an attempt really to think about how and even was it Giles Kent's living in a caravan, isn't he?
Pretty much.
Yeah, which again is just, it's an unnecessary detail. He could just have a house that's a room, but there's something about that.
I mean, I don't know if that's meant to symbolise that he's fallen down the status, because he was previously the security head or something.
Yes.
I don't know if it's just meant to show he's now in reduced circumstances, or it was just a practical thing set wise, But it works, yeah.
I did like the little touches, like they show the clip of Salamander giving his speech on a video wire.
Yes, which you operate by putting the wire in a drawer.
Yeah, it's
and
basically,
then it plays.
It looks a bit like a bracelet, doesn't it? You just sort of put that in a drawer. So that was quite good. But I agree that some of the thematic stuff is good. I mean, on that point, actually, as well, when they get to the point where they're the sort of survivalist group kept underground.
It's a bit of a left turn, isn't it?
That's a great twist as well, when you just see him, he goes into the chute.
Yeah, in episode 4, when you find that there's this whole other thing going on.
Yeah.
That is a nice little shock. So dramatically that works. And I do like I love the character of Colin.
Yes.
Very well played by Adam Verney, who sort of embodies... Bear in mind that this is the end of 67 going into 68.
Christmas, yeah.
And of course 68 will see some really big examples of youth questioning authority, the Paris, the demonstrations in France,
Grosvenor Square,
the Democratic Convention in Chicago in late 1968. So there's this thing about young people questioning the narrative that's being given to them by sort of establishment figures, it's clearly treading on some good themes. But I think
is exactly what the Doctor's trying to encourage in terms of people picking up Colin doesn't I mean, Colin never actually meets the Doctor. Oh, no, he does right at the end, doesn't he, when he's freed? Again, just that question everything. I mean, this is, I think, feels like one of the ultimate question everything stories, whereas that's what I was saying earlier about the Doctor's scepticism throughout. He's sceptical of everything. He demands proof, he demands his own thinking space, and it serves him right, because even the people that you might be drawn to as allies turn out to be traitors.
The thematic juice is really rich. It's of its time, but it's timeless. Tyranny, question everything, establishment voices, and how much you should trust them. Yeah, it's timely, timeless, and of its time at the same time. It's really, it's,
get that on a t-shirt.
It is good, but I just think that as a piece of television, and actually even the structure of the plot is really, really competent. I mean, that's, you can tell there's a strong hand on the tiller. But I think this is fatally holed beneath the waterline again, Barry Maud, by the fact that the central premise is shit. The doppelganger thing is so... It's just so lazy, and that's the central thing. Everything has to hang off that.
Well,
and if you basically just don't
the thing is, we've not really spoken about Troughton's performance as Salamander.
Well,
because I'm assuming it's probably there to give him a chance to do something else before he gets too bored in the role of the Doctor.
But the thing is, right, like the cliffhanger for episode 1 is whether his dodgy Mexican accent
will hold.
Which, bearing in mind, Salamander has a dodgy Mexican accent because it's Patrick Troughton doing it. So him doing a dodgier, I don't know. It's just like, I did laugh at that.
Yes. Hello, Bruce.
Hello, bro. Andale. It's like,
because the doppelganger thing was interesting because, like you say, that is the central premise, and it's a bit of a crap one. I wonder, like Jim, if the whole idea was more that it might be fun to see Troughton in the villain's role, and I think he's good as Salamander. I mean, it's a cliche.
I'm looking at two distinct characters when I'm
looking
at
it, and absolutely, and I think Salamander gets more screen time than the Doctor in this, or certainly
once you put him in
like he does.
That realistic makeup and things, you're going to want to get your money's worth out.
Absolutely,
they do make him look a bit swarthier, don't they?
They do make him look a little like he's
toasted.
Been abroad for a few weeks, but actually. Aside from a couple of key scenes where, in order to get from A to B, someone is able to mistake the Doctor for being Salamander, very little of the plot actually hinges on them looking alike. It's not like it continually refers back to that.
Well, I just think it wouldn't be able to do it, would it?
No.
With the technology at the time. It's kind of a miraculous thing in the very last scene when you get the two of them facing each other. It's
yes.
like, wow, they can actually do that, can they? It looks fairly decent. Yeah, just about. By strange coincidence, John's just lent me Bullseye, which stars Roger Moore and Michael Caine as it's Michael Winner comedy, isn't it? When they're two of them are
I think
a bunch
comedy is taking quite a lot of strain that it might not be able to bear.
But the plot there is that there are a pair of scientists and a pair of con men who both look the same. But my memory of this, it's been a long time since I've seen it. They have more editing facilities to have a bit of fun with that, don't they?
I mean, I don't.
All right,
think
fun's.
What's
you know
better,
what I'm getting
Michael
at.
Winner's Bullseye or the enemy of the
or
world?
Barry Lett's the enemy of the world.
I mean,
my point is, in a TV thing in the 60s, they just wouldn't be
Yes.
able to cut back and forth that way.
I don't agree, Matt, because I just think that, I know you say that they don't actually dwell on that thing, but it's the central...
Well, yeah,
everything,
I mean, it is in that you have... that's what kicks
just,
things off.
It's a lazy-ass, weak thing to do, and I just thought it was crap.
It's a slightly more interesting way of getting the Doctor embedded in the action than just he's lost the TARDIS, though, or what they'd normally do. Do you know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess. I think there's lots to like about it. As I said, thematically, it's the plotting, apart from what I consider to be the major sort of problem with the plot, getting from the beginning through the middle, the twists, especially in episodes 3 and 4, really well done. And the set design, as you already mentioned, the interiors, but not just that. When Salamander's lift descends into the...
Yeah, the model work is
great. The model
great.
work at that, it's a lot better than some of the model work we're going to discuss later, I think, from 1980.
I like the process stuff in the park as well. That looks quite nice.
Yeah.
When they meet on a park bench, it looks kind of misty because they've got a back projection thing going on there.
And good use of stock footage as well, like when they've got their binoculars out to see what's happening with the earthquakes or the volcano or whatever. Or
the exploding helicopter from...
Well, I don't know, where's the exploding helicopter from?
From Russia with Love.
Is it?
Yeah, stock
Really?
footage from there. Yeah.
No.
Way.
Oh, wow, that's cool. But I just, for me, the central plot point thing sort of kills it a bit for me.
Was Troughton's performance as Salamander not enough to get you over the line on that?
Yeah, I really enjoy seeing him.
Would you rather have seen a different actor play Salamander in this story?
I mean...
Because it feels to me that, as Jim said, the driver of that is more that, it would be fun to see Patrick Troughton play the villain, not that, we've got this slam dunk idea about a doppelganger.
I think part of the problem might be me, really, in the sense that I don't really like Troughton's Doctor enough.
Right.
To care whether, like, I'm seeing him, it's like, oh, no, my favourite Doctor playing, you know, Tom Baker later on, when we discuss Meglos, seeing him play a sort of another character is quite interesting, because I care.
Yeah.
I just don't care much about Troughton's era, of what I've seen of it so far.
So the era or the performance? This is quite interesting.
I think he's better than the material.
Yeah, I agree.
But because I just don't care much for that run of Who.
It's all a bit blah.
And I think that probably does say more about me in a way, and I concede that. But I don't think he does a bad job, the Doctor. He's good when he's given a great line, you know, in episode 1, when they think he's a salamander, or they're not quite sure, and he says, "I'm the nicest possible person," and he delivers it in a very cute way. But I just think that the central plot point really ruins it for me. It's over long; it's 6 episodes, and I know that we often take account of that. But I think it is quite dull.
You felt it, yeah.
I really felt it, and in addition to which, thematically, I felt it just seemed to be a bit all over the place. It didn't, the stuff in the corridor with Dinesh, it felt like it was going to go into a sort of Kafkaesque dark comedy of absurdity around bureaucracy and tyranny and so on and so forth. It didn't quite commit to that. It doesn't quite commit to spy-fi. It doesn't quite commit to sci-fi. Now, you can say that Doctor Who is a box of tricks and can do all those things at once, and that's part of its charm, but I just don't really feel it thematically committed, really.
No. And there are some more. I mean, you mentioned in the kitchen scenes earlier as well.
Yes,
That's like,
yes. Can we move on to Griffin the chef?
Well, yes, let's. I mean, I think
Reg Lai.
Oh man, he's amazing.
I mean, he's a great character. It does feel like you're suddenly watching something else, though, for those scenes, which is sort of, I think, what
and
John
like I
was
say,
driving
that
at.
was the only episode. That was
Yeah.
the only episode that existed, so that was sort of entire.
But I mean, it is genuinely funny. They give him funny lines. Really as well. The first course affected by bomb explosion, second course affected by earthquake. I'm going out for a walk. It'll probably rain. Really, I really like that.
Yeah, it's funny. It's
It's fantastic. Yeah.
But also, that's one of the few sort of major scenes for Victoria that, I mean, they do sideline her massively.
Oh, she's a real dramatic dynamo in this. I mean, poor Deborah Watling. There's nothing for her to do.
Absolutely not. But at least compared to something like where there's a lot for her to do in The Web of Fear, but that involves her wandering around just going,
Doctor.
I mean, basically, they cut her screen time massively. Jamie gets a lot to do in this, and Fraser...
He looks very cute. He looks very sexy in that
well, he's going for it,
isn't he?
Yeah.
Well, Fraser Hines is great in this.
He's always good.
Yeah.
No, I think he and Troughton are always better than the material, even though the material's pretty lousy. I mean, if you look at the Wikipedia entry on this, as I'm fond of saying, that's the limit of my research. They say, this is a sort of welcome respite from
monsters,
from the base under siege, monster of the week kind of thing.
I agree with that,
and I'm sure that's true, because I think the formulaic. Well, if you have a formula like the Third Doctor era has a formula, but it's a good formula.
It's a format.
A format, yes.
And that's the difference. It's not just a formula that you repeat every week. It's a format that allows you to have a continual engine running in terms of how your stories are generated. And
I think perhaps with Barry Letts having directed this, there are little hints of what's going to come in the Pertwee era.
Yeah.
The helicopter, the action, the base with the...
I was going to say, the whole thing feels more like a Pertwee story.
Yeah.
Just the slightly earthier...
And I know we're talking about Base Under Siege being of this era, but just even the set design and the sort of control room stuff, it just feels really...
people wandering around with clipboards reading off numbers, that's super Pertwee.
Yeah, exactly, right? That kind of thing. So, again, there are things I can point to and say are good, but I just found it dull, and it didn't quite hang together for me.
Well, Philip Morris, if you're listening, I'm glad it's back. Thanks, mate.
Pleasant surprise.
Cheers.
Those fears. You didn't want to screw it up.
My name is Bond. James Bond.
Roger would come in and Sean would come into my mind.
My name is James Bond.
In the end, I didn't fight them, I just let them in. And I just thought, well, it's balls to the wall, really. Just say it and own it as much as you can.
My name's Bond. James Bond.
Hold on to your hat. It's going to be such a fast ride. And it was.
So, like Joseph Fiennes, we flash forward to... It's a great link, isn't
pleased with your own material.
We flash forward to 15th of May 2010, and while the Tories and the Lib Dems were inking their coalition deal, we had Amy's Choice on the television from season 5, which is about...
And pray, what happens in Amy's Choice, John?
Well, so Amy and Rory have left the 11th Doctor behind and are getting used to life in Ledworth and the prospect of imminent parenthood because Amy's heavily pregnant. Or are they?
Or are they heavily pregnant?
I mean, getting used to... Yeah.
Oh, okay.
When the Doctor returns, hilariously by accident, the travellers find that they're caught in a trap. Caught in a trap. Set by the mysterious Dream Lord, who demands they choose which of the worlds they find themselves in is real and which is an illusion, and if they choose wrongly, they die.
So either they're stuck in Ledworth with some zombie grannies, or they are stuck in the Tardis about to freeze to death.
About to freeze to death because of stuff.
And one is real and one is not. The Dream Lord wants to make them choose.
So, again, this is written by Simon Nye.
Writer of Men Behaving Badly.
Yes.
And no other episodes of Doctor Who.
Oh, really?
One of the many Moffat dead ends.
And directed by
this might work. Oh, no.
Catherine Moorehead.
Yep.
I think this generally has a pretty good reputation within this run. I think perhaps not least because of Toby Jones' performance as the Dream Lord. Jim, what did you make of this?
I've probably said this before. I'm keen to not keep repeating the same things about the Matt Smith era. The thing is, it's quite difficult. The thing is, it's kind of difficult to review this without coming back to this.
Yeah.
This is a good setup, I think. It's a good setup, but the thing is, watching it really relies on you caring about Amy, Rory, and the Doctor.
The big problem.
And if you don't, then you've just got a setup.
Yes.
And that's kind of what I think here. I really want to like it. And I remember when this run was on, this felt a bit better than the ones in preceding weeks.
No, I really do like
the idea of the English village, which is not quite what it seems. That's a fairly traditional thing from stuff like the Avengers, but all sorts of other science fiction and fantasy stuff from an earlier time. The sort of alien possessed pensioners is a nice idea. It's cute and a little bit unworldly.
And weird, yep.
But yeah, the essential thing is I'm not really that bothered about whether these characters are real. And I'm apologising for saying this because we're all loved up on Russell T Davies, but you just can't help but think if this was Rose and Mickey or someone, I can feel how this would be a much better episode. However, Toby Jones is fantastic. Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I think I basically agree. I watched this morning. I thought it was all right. It kind of held my attention for 45 minutes. But to me, it's sort of its headline attraction and main thing that it is memorable for is Toby Jones as a Dream Lord. And I think he's he's great in concept and execution. I think it's a great idea for this character who's like a sort of... It's almost like the Maze Master from the Crystal Maze, he pops up to set a challenge and then disappears and then reappears to sort of sarcastically taunt them all throughout. And I love that he keeps turning up in different costumes, like when he's working when the Doctor runs into the butcher's and he's in there in the butcher's outfit and he says, people have really got to keep using these shops, otherwise they're just going to go away. So all that stuff.
That's really sinister,
all that stuff really made me laugh. And how actually he... I'm surprised Moffat left it all in, but he's pretty brutal in deconstructing the Doctor's sort of faux eccentricity at this point, where he basically tears strips out of him for his tawdry quirks, like his bow tie.
But no, I'm sorry, I'm not surprised Moffat left it in, because it's precisely that kind of meta bollocks.
Yeah, that's true.
That is Moffat. And the problem with the deconstruction by the Dream Lord is that he is precisely taking apart the fact that this era of Doctor Who, the Matt Smith era, is just all this sort of quirky artifice and not much heart. And the real problem with this story, and Jim absolutely nailed it, is that the stakes feel so low because
especially
I don't
in the butcher's
care.
shop.
low prices. The stakes are so low because I just don't care about these three. And this is the whole episode is built on Amy's choice and the fact that she can't imagine her life without Rory and choosing between not just the two realities but the Doctor and Rory, and it's basically a sort of love triangle, and you're meant to care about that so much, and yet the characters don't really exist. The Doctor, as written in this era, is a series of tawdry quirks.
Yes.
A bow tie and a bloody geography teacher's jacket.
Which you were wearing today, in fact.
Well, just because I'm not wearing a bow tie, please.
No, you've got
Well,
an
John,
amusing...
if nothing else, is known for his tawdry quirks.
Oh, yeah, I own it, absolutely. And we've discussed ad infinitum, ad nauseum even, that, there's just no chemistry between Karen Gillan and Arthur Darvill. And although Darvill and Smith, for me, do their best with the material throughout the season and indeed subsequent seasons, there's just nothing, there's not really much for them to do in terms of building their characters, and they're not good enough actors to inject character into it regardless. They're not a Capaldi or or even a Tom Baker who could just inhabit, just take the screen. So you just don't care, essentially. And when the whole thing is meant to be a sort of psychological...
It's there in the title, Amy's Choice.
Yeah, exactly. It's a psychological and romantic and very personal, personal stakes. That's the fact that you don't care about the people on the screen, I think, is a serious problem. It undermines everything.
Well, to not be... Because I've said it must be quite tedious for listeners if we're just being pro-RTD all the time.
Especially if you love this era.
Yeah. Let me just ask, if this, you mentioned Capaldi, if this same story was done with Capaldi and, let's say, Bill, do you think that would be a much better story? Or?
Well, I don't think it would be quite... It wouldn't be quite possible, would it? Because their dynamic is very different. I mean, I'll say this for Moffat. I think that...
Or Clara and Danny Pink or something?
Well, let's not go there.
Okay.
But I think, to be fair to Moffat, it was clear in season 10. It was season 10
that's just been on.
That's just been on, Bill. Yeah.
Season 10. He's... just for his last season, he's pressed a big fat reset button, and I think delivered his best season, and developed relationships and characters that really did work. Now, I don't know what anybody else thinks about that, but I'm happy to say, as someone who's dissed Moffat considerably, especially for sort of series 5 and 6 and 7, that I think he's progressively improved. Every Capaldi season has been better and better.
Yeah,
and I think he's ended on a high, which is, I'm glad for him, but not
and
that
you
it
as a viewer as well.
Yeah, and as a viewer, I'm just like
you enjoyed it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't suppose he. I say I'm happy for him. I don't suppose he cares because series 5 through 7 were very, very popular. So I don't suppose he cares much at all. But I just think in this era, there's just none of that, and I just don't think it would quite. You wouldn't be able to do this story with Capaldi and Bill, I think. But you could have done it with, say, Tennant and Rose. Yes,
I mean, I completely agree. I think that is when it's so central to the story here. I mean, I think there's a couple of occasional green shoots that made me think that they might be stepping it forward a little bit with this. Those were that I think that the script does at least, I think, acknowledge that the more interesting aspect of this completely non-combustible love triangle that doesn't work at all is the conflict between the Doctor and Rory themselves and their different views of the world, not necessarily with Amy as a fulcrum. I mean, Amy is a total blank canvas in this, and there's absolutely nothing to project onto why her choice might matter. But the bits where it's very much the Doctor's vision of the world sparring against Rory's vision of the world felt maybe a tiny bit more fleshed out than it might be elsewhere in the season.
I disagree because I think the problem is that again it comes back to the fact that this is Amy's choice, and it's really it's about.
I mean, that is the problem.
How she looks at this, and there is nothing we've been shown in her character that would indicate that she would make the choice that could lead to her having the cosy domestic life in the village.
No,
because she sounds bored with it at the beginning, doesn't she?
Yeah, I mean, she's it's some Brexity little hellhole, right? And indeed, that the Doctor, that when they have the dream at the beginning where they've all had the same dream, and he wakes up and says, "Oh, I've had a nightmare." And it's so hilarious that he says he's had a nightmare. But there's nothing. I mean, there is nothing in the way Amy's written at all. Period. But there is nothing in what we even do know about her to suggest that she would be satisfied with that that life in that way. And so,
and in fact, the
so
script...
it feels completely unearned when she does in the end choose Rory.
Yes, although it's one of... And this is the other major problem with this, is that it's cop-outs on top of cop-outs at the end. So the idea that the whole Dream Lord scenario was in itself a bad dream that the Doctor was having because of some psychic pollen is just...
Oh, come on. I wrote that down. The psychic pollen is a crappy MacGuffin.
Well, that's just an explanation for what's happening. But the main idea that he's the evil side of the Doctor's mind is... Okay, not super original, but it's a fun thing to watch, I think.
No, that's a good idea. And
the fact they explain it away with pollens, by the by.
Oh, no, it's just like... Oh, I just hate that kind of shit. Let's put some effort into it.
Well, I mean, psychic pollen is the laziest.
It's very will this do?
Yeah,
isn't it?
It's fine. We'll replace that with something like, we've filmed it.
It's causing chaos on the streets of Wolverhampton at the moment.
The other thing I was just going to say that there are a few brief moments immediately after Rory dies where I'm going to say I thought Karen Gillan was quite good. For a couple of minutes, she dials it right back. Given something to do, right, your boyfriend has just died. Really sort of straight down the line, here's an emotional beat for you to react to. And I think she's all right for a couple of minutes. But there you go. There, I said it. Let's talk about Toby Jones, who's a much better actor.
He's great, yeah.
Well, he just the trouble is here as well. He shows everybody up.
Yes.
And that you really see the gap, because I do think Matt Smith does an effective performance as the Doctor. It's very, given the sort of very clear link between him and Troughton, that they even talked about at the time of the casting, and as a thing that Matt Smith referenced. Ironically, I also lump them together in the sense that I think that they are both Doctors where the performance was better than a lot of the material, and the era. But like, even with someone who like Matt Smith, who I do respect his performance, once he's with Toby Jones, you're just going, fuck, that's an actor. And he really brings
He's astonishing.
it. Yeah, and it's such a turn, and you're kind of desperate to see Toby Jones as
play
the Doctor, or as
it's
like or as the Master, or as something. You want to see, desperate to see him again, and he's just mesmerising.
And he's great. He's
been a great recurring villain.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it looked like it was going that way, didn't it?
Well, after
bring him in, you thought, he'll be coming back. And certainly by the cliffhanger of Pandorica Opens, I thought, this will be a dream that after they've blown up the universe, I think, right, it'll be a dream from the Dream Lord. It's like, nope,
I know.
Won't see him
completely
again.
forgot about.
Yeah.
He's gone. Well, there's almost the implication when the Doctor goes, I know who this is. Who could hate me as much as this? And obviously the twist is it's the Doctor because he hates himself. Although that doesn't really make any sense. But it's
an attempt to give the character some depth.
To be fair, I think
that
does make to recognise the level of self-criticism that's within you. I think that's something that, again, they're aiming for something quite deeply psychological here. And I don't necessarily think that ambition is wrong. I don't even think that it's not even badly executed. Actually, there are wider problems with the era and the casting that I think fatally undermine this as a potential winner.
Just going back to Toby Jones, or to drill down a bit on it, I'm not sure was he that familiar a face at this point. I think he'd done a fair few things.
But I think he's
this is a few years back now, because
he'd already done Infamous, hadn't he?
Is that the Truman Capote thing? Because I'd seen him in things like The Mist.
Is it Infamous or is it Capote? There were two films.
I think it sort of felt like this was the start of him being in everything as like a some
go-to person for that kind of character.
He'd already been the voice of Dobby in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets.
But no, it's just weirdly thinking, because the variety of things he's played, but he does seem to very effortlessly go from being a man-child in certain things like The Mist or The Detectorists or something, to effortlessly sinister, It's a weird comparison. He's a bit like Philip Seymour Hoffman. He can seem to do those two things really well, and it doesn't look like he's putting that much effort into
Ironically, you should mention that, of course, because they both played Truman Capote in films that were released like 8 months apart or something. So, yeah.
And we're not going to be reviewing Trial of a Time Lord for some time yet. I'm guessing
he's
you
not
guys...
in that, is he?
Well, no, but the villain in that is, again, essentially the dark side of the Doctor. And I'm just saying...
yeah, and there was even speculation that this was the Valiard or whatever.
Without looking at Trial too much, they do nothing with that other than saying it. They don't do anything with that with the Valiard. Whereas here, the fact that he's really got under his skin and knows exactly what he's about and what he's doing, they just seem to have put that bit more effort into it.
Oh, yeah, and some of and it seems like, I don't know whether they knew it was going to be Toby Jones when they wrote it, but it does seem like, insofar as anybody's brought their A game, it's to the lines that are for the Dream Lord. But it just, again, that whole sort of meta... Because the trouble is, the critique he has of the Doctor the trouble is, as a viewer, it just rang true for me. You know,
and then didn't back it up with, but there's also this as well about me.
No, exactly.
There's nothing there to...
No, it doesn't.
No.
None of it's really rebutted.
That's the thing. I mean, yes, I don't think it's very good. I'll give this episode a pass, I think, just because I like the Dream Lord and I like Toby Jones, and that is a marquee attraction for me. And I enjoyed it.
Well, would you like to have seen him come back?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Still
I would have
Yeah,
still would
still
exactly. I would have loved to have been a sort of series long big bad or something like that.
Can you imagine him and Capaldi as well?
Yeah,
like that would be amazing.
Super heavyweight.
Yeah. Having sort of taken a massive dump on this, there's a couple of bits that I did like, and I think Jim alluded to this as well. But the village and the creepy village and the that sort of thing, it reminded me a little bit of the Demons, however you pronounce it. But
yes,
there was a 70s Pertwee-esque sort of.
Well, the English village is not quite there. It's the Avengers.
Yeah, as well, very much so. Yeah,
and things like the android invasion in Doctor Who earlier as well. Yeah,
but I did like the weirdness as well of when you've got the pensioners marching on Amy and Rory's house, and they've sort of grabbed whatever they've got to hand. So there's one shot where there's an old lady with this sort of massive plank of wood, but also still holding onto her handbag around it as well. And then another shot where there's an old boy who's just clearly taken the birdhouse or the bird table out of the grass and is walking towards the door with that. And I thought there was some nice direction. And
actually, I should have mentioned this a few minutes ago because you were kind of going onto that territory, Matt. But the tension between Rory and the Doctor was interesting. I think through the prism of what it means to be. How do you negotiate masculinity in the 21st century?
Ponytail.
Yes. So, well, I was going to say I've made a note of this. This is a side point, but this makes also one of the fates. Sorry to be negative again. It does something that means I won't enjoy it, which is stuff that's meant to be funny that's not funny.
Yeah.
Funny business, and the whole thing with Rory's mullet and his
which looks like a really bad wig anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think it's meant to even, but it's just, it's not funny. But that negotiation of how does masculinity manifest itself? How do you suppress it? Does suppressing it make things worse? Both the Doctor, this Doctor, and Rory, neither of them are like alpha male, heavily built, sort of
they're not
macho men, right?
Yeah.
And that makes sense at a time, this is 2005, but, we're in the 21st century and there's a renegotiation of masculinity and I don't want to say a crisis of masculinity, but there's a big question mark about how does, in a liberal society in which, women quite rightly are gaining greater status, how do you negotiate that? Grayson Perry's book, The Ascent of Man... Yes. The Descent of Man. Yeah. The Descent of Man covers this kind of territory. What does that new masculinity look like? And it's interesting to see these two men who, on the face of it, are not macho men and would reject all of that kind of thing. Actually, you don't need to scratch much beneath the surface to see that does manifest itself, but they don't really know how to do it.
No.
Because they reject that kind of masculinity. So that's an interesting idea. It's something that Doctor Who could and should explore. And so it's an interesting thematic meat, and it's interesting that it is from Simon Nye, who wrote Men Behaving Badly, which kind of charts the beginning of that era,
sort of the deconstruction of the bloke.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So I didn't much like Men Behaving Badly, I must say, but
I did rather like Men Behaving Badly.
Fine,
anyway,
but I recognise its importance in doing that kind of thing.
Oh.
Never ever seen.
I think it's pretty funny.
There's many shows I've never seen. Yeah.
But I recognise its importance in
yes.
in this.
I mean, that's what it's doing. It's about taking the bloke and then peeling the layers off.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's interesting. But it just, again, because of the fact that I don't really care about the characters and they're not very well drawn, it can't really live up to the expectation of that thematic meat.
No.
Does thematic meat have expectations?
We're back to the butcher's shop again, aren't we?
What is it actually made of?
I don't know, Ray. Yeah. What's inside the bump?
It's latex prosthetic bump.
Okay.
So it's completely latex.
Ray Holman costume.
That's why we have a little
belly button.
Yeah.
See?
So no stuffing. So it's slightly heavy as well.
And I have massive breasts made of lentils.
That's lovely.
And for our final story tonight, we're going back to 1980 to watch Meglos, in which the Fourth Doctor, Romana and K9 are summoned to the jungle world of Tigella to help out with the dodecahedron, which is Tigella's source of power, which is stolen by shape-shifting villain Meglos and a band of space pirates. By the time the Doctor arrives, he gets blamed for the theft and faces the death sentence from local priestess Lexa. This is, if we were to summon these up as Friends stories,
evil doubles.
This is the one with the cactus version of Tom Baker in it.
Mm-hmm.
It is from Tom Baker's final season, so we are in the early days of John Nathan Turner and his creative partnership with Christopher H. Bidmead.
So there's still the guiding hand of Barry Letts at this point.
Yes.
Well, he's keeping an eye.
Barry Letts keeping
Half an eye.
Keeping an eye over the shop. John, what do you think of Meglos?
I think this is a fine example, and I don't mean it's good, but this is a fine
We're going
example.
to go for a hat trick tonight,
This
John.
is a fine example of the Doctor Who procedural.
Right.
It is what it is. It's fine. It's not great. It's okay. The model work is terrible. The CSO is a bit crappy. The walking cacti people are terrific. And especially Tom Baker as a walking cactus. I just loved it. It's absolutely, it's 100%, it's absolutely fine. It's not great. It's 4 episodes, it goes by. It's a Doctor Who procedural. There's an issue, they deal with it. I didn't hate it. Didn't like it that much.
Mm-hmm.
I think the society we're introduced to with the very rigid split between scientists and theocrats is really Route 1 as a concept. They're not enmeshed or, there's not conflicting loyalties. There's one group of theocrats, one group of scientists.
Yes, you don't have scientists that also go to church on a Sunday or liberal theocrats.
No, well, I'm not sure how you can be a liberal theocrat, but I know what you mean. Yes, I know what you mean. It's really, really Route 1, rigid, black and white sort of territory. That's really lazy. The direction is absolutely useless. I apologise to Terence Dudley for this opinion, but in episode 1, I think it is, that you can't, if you've got a cactus that's talking, you can't just point the camera at the fucking cactus and have the voiceover.
Yeah,
it's just the whole minutes seem to go by where there's just the camera
static shot of a cactus.
Static shot of a cactus. It's just unreal. So that they lose brownie points for that. The ludicrous design work on this. I mean, the scientist haircuts. They're so they look like parodies of. You remember what's that Mark Gatiss parody? Mark Gatiss and
the Web of Caves.
Yeah, with the Doctor.
Yeah.
It looks like a parody of a 60s Doctor Who alien.
Yeah.
Right? It looks like a parody of one. It's ridiculous with their stupid bowl cuts and shit. They look like Mike Flowers. The mystery plotting in episode 1, what's this, what's that, what's the dodecahedron, it just all feels a bit half-baked.
Yeah.
And I just, the model work is really funny. The comic relief of the sort of the weird mercenaries who've sort of been through they're turning up to a Mongolian themed fancy dress party.
Yeah.
They're not funny. They're meant to be the comic relief and they're not funny. Romana sort of leading them round and round and round the jungle planet thing. It isn't funny. But I'm dissing it overly.
You didn't hate it?
I didn't hate
the
it.
Time.
It passed the time. It's fine. There's a planet. The Doctor arrives. They solve a problem. He buggers off. Fine. Whatever.
Jim, Meglos, go.
This has a very bad rep.
Does it?
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
And it kind of stands out in season 18 because the rest of those are very much with the imprint of Chris Bidmead making things sciencey.
Yes.
And it's easy to look at this and think, oh, this was a script from the Graham Williams era that they just had lying around and needed to do. No, apparently it was commissioned by Chris Bidmead because he knew the writers.
I did wonder that because I made a note that they still haven't managed to get rid of the arsing around with K9 in the Tardis at the beginning, which seemed to me to be a real hallmark of
hold some record for how long it takes for the Doctor to get involved with the plot because they're on the Tardis till the middle of the second episode or something. So yeah, it's got a bad rep. It sounds like a really stupid idea. I find this lots of fun. It is so bonkers. And yeah, it is a bad directorial choice to just show the cactus flat on rather than moving the camera around a bit. But yeah, that does feel like The Good Is or Python or something. I think there is something nicely ludicrous about this. I just found it very enjoyable. Yeah, the writers aren't that good, and they didn't come back to Doctor Who. They were
Flanagan and
McCulloch, is it?
McCulloch, yeah.
Yeah, they were going to do Davison's debut story, but it didn't really. I won't drill down it. There was a lot of criticism of them because they don't really flesh out their characters, and John's sort of got to grips with that. The pirates, the mercenaries, don't do a great deal, but I think the pirates are kind of fun as characters. I think Bill Fraser's performance is good fun. I've forgotten the actor who plays Brotadak.
If Robert Holmes was writing them.
Yeah, you can say it's coming from that kind of direction. But yeah, I just think there's enough there, and things like the chronic hysteresis, this time loop they're caught in for a while, which gets a lot of criticism.
Yeah, it's really tedious.
Well, I think Philip Sandifer's famous
Not
Doctor
only is it
Who
tedious,
blogger,
but the way they get out of it is absolutely...
well, I'm glad you say that, John, because that's what Philip Sandifer spends a whole essay writing about. Thinking, have you got nothing else to say about this story other than, well, this isn't how time would work, you know? Yeah, that would be like having a season-long thing when the Doctor gets shot in the first episode, and then it's revolved by him just fooling time with a sort of robot version of himself at the end or
that
something.
would be really crap.
Yeah, but at least this just resolves one cliffhanger rather than an entire season's worth of build-up. You know?
And chronic hysteresis is a very funny phrase as well.
Yes, someone named a fanzine after it as well, I think. But yeah, no, my basic thing is, for all that's wrong with this, I actually find it bonkers and fun, and it's trying to be a little bit hitchhikers-y with the Earthling turning up for no good reason. And just the bellowing cactus is a fun idea. And Tom Baker's really good in it. I think the makeup shot of him with the spines and everything did turn up in a lot of publicity, and so it should, because it looks quite weird.
It still looks good.
Yeah.
They made a...
Madame Tussauds.
Yes, because for a while Tom Baker was the only person to be in Madame Tussauds twice, because they made up a separate one of him with the cactus face on it. So clearly...
moulded it again and with a different coloured wax.
Clearly someone was paying attention.
Yeah.
I mean, I sort of pretty split the difference between the two of you. I mean, I quite liked this. I maybe liked it a little more than John did. I find a lot of this season, after what I would describe as, I think, the drift of the late Graham Williams era, where it just feels that no one really has a sort of firm handle on what's going on and what's supposed to be going on.
Mucking about.
Yeah, there's a lot of mucking about. Certainly this first John Nathan Turner season feels like there's a sense of purpose to it. You've got a new creative team who want to do something. And I think in terms of a lot of the way of some of how it's presented, this quite rigid, I mean, as John says, this very rigidly delineated society, but they have sort of put at the heart of what this is going to be about a cultural dispute. Tom Baker is back on the leash. He's bottled. He's not messing around as much as he was previously, and it's a bit sciencey in places. So I think there's a kind of sense of purpose, and we're trying to get this train back on the rails after the Graham Williams era. But I find it's a bit of a po-faced plod in places. I find the thing I don't like about Series 18, ironically, having criticised the Graham Williams era for doing the opposite, it takes itself so seriously. And there are lines in there which, chronic hysteresis, continually mentioning the screens of Zolfathura, which, is not anything you should ever really give an actor to say.
I kept wondering, what the hell are they on about with these screens? What the hell is that?
The panels.
Yeah, the panels,
the panels of Zolfathura.
I even heard it as screams, all the left on
which
the planet.
Which sounds poetic.
Screams.
But no, it's the screens.
Yeah, because I thought that was a real sort of Russell T Davies thing at the beginning. All that's left on the planet are the screams. Screams.
The screams of all that's left of the screams of Zolfathura.
That's amazing.
Wow, that's an image.
No, it's a screen. Some panels.
I don't know. I mean, I think this is I find this very middling. But I think Tom Baker is great in both of his roles.
Reparability is built in as standard.
And I think that's probably what we'll want to talk about, really, isn't it? It's the fact that casting Tom Baker in a villainous role, but at a point where his Doctor is, in and of himself, becoming a lot more sort of cold and broody again and sombre, is an interesting choice, because there's not... Weirdly, his villainy comes through in Meglos being a lot more animated by the Doctor than the Doctor. So, the point sometimes when he's screaming, "I am Meglos," at the top of his voice.
What was the previous story? Nymon?
Leisure Hive.
Oh, Leisure Hive.
But yeah, Nymon was only just before that. Then,
yeah.
Yes,
of course, the Leisure Hive, because the reason K9 is bollocks is because of the seawater.
Well, that Christopher Binet took that word out and came up with a more scientific
bollocks,
one.
mistress.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of odd that, well, we deliberately chose this with Enemy of the World for the evil doubles of the Doctor kind of thing. But looking at this is kind of a more James Bond plot than we've had in a while. Because it's odd to have just a sort of, other than the Master, for the threat to just be a mega villain who has a plan and wants to get the Doctor out of the way before he can interfere and stuff. I just thought that was kind of odd. And I think people have suggested in the past that Tom Baker stayed too long and something else he might have been quite good at would be playing a Bond villain. So I don't know if Meglos might have been a nice little demo of that.
Show reel.
He is very good as Rasputin in that.
That was on recently, yeah.
What's it called?
Nicholas and Alexandra.
Yeah. Although he is obviously a very particular character actor, he does have range, and I think he proves it here. Yeah, as Meglos, he's got a steely certainty, and he's quite chilling. And even though the Doctor is sort of, as you say, back on the leash a little, you can see that he's looser even in movement as the Doctor. You're never confused as to which is which visually.
No, and
even
actually,
though he's not doing
some of
much
those
with
scenes
it.
as well.
He's got a bit of a spring in his step when he's the Doctor. There's all these stuff at the end.
Yeah, I mean, some of those scenes towards the end, especially where you've got the Doctor and Meglos walking in and out of shot, and like you say, you know exactly who, because the little body mannerisms. There's a bit where Meglos goes outside and he's just sort of momentarily just circling his shoulders and like trying to iron out a crick in his neck or something, like this is an uncomfortable body for him. But just the body language is very, very different.
Yeah, it's well done.
Yeah. So it's almost like, and that's maybe why I sometimes think in these later ones, Tom Baker's performance becomes, it's positively funereal by the time you get to Logopolis, maybe appropriately so. And sometimes that seems like a great somber performance, and sometimes it seems like he's just sleepwalking through it and his mind's elsewhere. But it feels like he's actually quite engaged by the dual role in this, which is a good thing. I was also going to say that I don't feel like that many precedents in classic Doctor Who of the Doctor being sent for, at least not, he's recalled to Gallifrey several times, but that feels like quite an idea that would come back a lot more in the new series, that there's these network of people whose lives the Doctor has touched.
Or certainly in the JNT era, he seems to have a sort of big collection of old pals he's revisiting, yeah.
Yes. But yeah, the idea that Zaster, who is
he's astonishing,
who's terrible.
Well, it's appalling. Edward Underwood, who apparently was very ill when he did this.
Oh right, okay. Well,
and again, he's in Thunderball.
Oh really?
Yeah, a little bit of a link there. Yeah.
But yeah, the Zaster is the old friend.
Yeah. I'll bite.
I think he's like the air marshal when they're doing the briefing with them.
Oh right. Okay.
When they've stolen the missiles, I think he's in the big conference.
It's not Underwater Frogman 14.
No.
Okay.
Of course, Edward Underwood is not the main attraction in the guest cast.
No, he is not.
No, he is not.
We have
Jackie
Dodo
Hill.
back. Sorry, yeah.
I
Sorry?
temporarily forgot who between
Jackie Hill
and Jackie Lane.
Yes.
Playing Lexa, the High Priestess.
John looks stunned. So
who's she?
Do you remember there was Ian and Barbara in the Hartnell era?
What?
You remember Barbara?
Barbara, played by Jackie Hill.
What? Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't notice.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, I didn't notice.
I thought you were saving this.
Yeah, this is the advantage of doing it with someone who's not as
no, I didn't clock that at all. No.
Yeah. Interesting.
Must have been the headgear.
Yes, and the long wig. Cascaded. Yes, so we have Barbara back in it.
Barbara back. She was
Barbara
in Spy Love Me.
Shut up,
Mrs. Ringo.
Do you think that's
why
why
did this happen?
Do you think that's why? Do you think that's
the
why
entire
she's?
Story, or?
Do you think that's why she's afforded a relatively honourable death, despite being completely wrong about everything up to that point?
I was sort of wondering whether or not at what point, what.
Yeah, I think she had retired from acting for quite a few years.
Yeah,
you
and
can tell.
Can't remember who on the production team was pals with her or got a word in, but yeah, just sort of got her back in to do this. But yeah, I think she did.
Because it's a very unassuming thing to do, or a sort of unassuming role to drop her into, considering how iconic she is.
I'm wondering, because this is only the second JNT era story to be broadcast, although they were filmed in a sort of wonky order.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if even this early JNT is already plotting a certain amount of how can I get us in the papers?
Yes.
And having a photograph of the new companion and the first companion together is obviously the sort of thing. He doesn't repeat that, but he keeps that kind of thing going throughout his time as producer. I think her performance is perfectly good.
Yeah.
Given how it's not a very well written script character-wise, I think she probably does invest it with a bit more than it would have had otherwise.
Yes. Well, she's still a good actress, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And her character seems convinced of herself rather than a power-mad person who wants power for the sake of it. Or whatever.
Yes.
I mean, did you find it weird to see her back again, or
not?
Or
really,
she's playing someone so different.
Not really, but yes, but also just the sort of style and grammar of Doctor Who has changed so much by this point that it's, she's playing such a different character against such a different type of both regular and supporting cast, and it's in colour. It was very nice to see her, to be honest, was just kind of my thought on it, really, and I don't think it sort of really carried anymore. It's not like they're bringing Barbara back. I've done that again. You're going to do this.
No, although it does make you think about... I'm not sure how familiar you are with Mordred Undead, but that originally was going to be Ian Chesterton rather than the Brigadier.
I was thinking about Mordred Undead the other day. When are we reviewing that? I've got some thoughts on that.
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I've got
Before
5 years worth
we leave
of this.
the EU.
Who knows? But no, it shows you, gives you some idea of what that could have worked if they brought her back for that or something. Maybe as a maths teacher or a history teacher at a school or something.
Yeah, I didn't clock it.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing.
I absolutely didn't clock it.
I thought so. You're a big fan of Barbara.
I am. Yes.
Oh well. Next time you watch Meglos, you'll be able to keep an eye out for that.
The thing I didn't like, perhaps I was sort of swayed by the appalling characterization, just because, as I say, because it's so black and white with the scientists and the theocrats. It's just I find it very difficult to sort of latch on to that world because you can't really imagine it. I mean, there's no character that's torn between the two. I don't know. I just thought that was just really lazy. Yeah. So maybe that's why I didn't notice, or maybe I'm just really unobservant.
Yeah. Well,
I think we that certainly.
Well, let our listeners write in and decide. I thought the music was pretty good for this.
Oh yes. So
is it Peter Howell on this one, or
it's Peter Howell for episodes 2 to 4, but it's Paddy Kingsland for episode 1? Is that right?
Yeah.
Because again, I mentioned Hitchhikers, and as soon as I heard the music in episode 1, it sounded so much like the stuff from the second radio series of Hitchhikers, which I really like. I like the series, but I really like Paddy Kingsland's music in that because it's genuinely good, but also seems to be taking the piss out of sci-fi kind of themes anyway. And then you hear this, and it sounds a lot like that. And I'm not sure if that's just his general style.
Yes,
but I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why he only did one episode and Peter Howell did the others. Or whether it's more the other way around, Howell only had time to do 3 and then he did.
Because we're very early into the radiophonic workshop supplying all of the music, as opposed to, because basically they got rid of Dudley Simpson at the end of
recently
the previous...
departed,
Yes, the late Dudley Simpson at the end of the previous series. And, they obviously... J&T sort of famously sent his boss copies of the first 2 Jean-Michel Jarre albums and said, I want to make the music like this. And his boss hated it and said, no, don't. And then he tried to do it anyway, nevertheless. The Leisure Hive sort of famously almost got wall-to-wall music. I mean, that's a big score. But there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, like all the sort of vocoder choir work, which is a bit subliminal, but at the point where they're going to sacrifice the Doctor to Ty, and you've got this sort of choral chant done through the vocoders of the choir just going, Ty, 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 Ty.
I'm not sure, you guys, this will be before you guys' time, the Radiophonics Workshop, possibly even Peter Howell, did the theme to some medical documentary show.
Right.
I can't remember if it was Your Life in Their Hands or something, or Jonathan Miller, but I think the theme music to that had this kind of vocoder thing. I remember an interview saying the guy was, if it was Peter Howell, he said loads and loads of people wrote in because they were just absolutely fascinated by this. They'd not heard anything like that before. It was
well, Peter Howell loves a vocoder because they're all over his version of the theme tune, which is obviously this is only the second story that's got the Peter Howell arrangement of the theme and all that sort of guitar vocoder sound that he's got on it. I mean, this is just a note, and I don't know if either of you noticed this, but on the final episode, the theme tune is pitched down several semitones.
I'd read that. I did, like John with Barbara, I didn't notice it though.
Or maybe it's just because I'm sort of musically minded. I thought, that's weird. I mean, was it a mistake? Was it an early version?
I mean, I just read this, but apparently because the new version was on, there have been complaints in Radio Times, or letters have been printed, and there's some theory it might have been an attempt to try and make it sound more like the Delia Derbyshire arrangement. Yeah.
Interesting little side there. Anyway,
Romana really doesn't have much to do here, does she?
No.
I mean, she's just a bit of a spare part.
I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Lala Ward, to be honest.
No, she's great.
Really?
Yeah, I really like Romana too.
I don't quite get it. It's the sort of haughtiness. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Your Jim's talking very quietly there. John, any thoughts?
Although I don't like her outfit in this.
Right. Yeah, no, I tend to agree with Matt, but she is very good in City of Death. So,
have you got anything to say about the planet's lush vegetation?
Well, you mean the grabbing plants?
Yeah.
They're quite fun, aren't they?
Tentacle plants.
Yeah, that's quite fun.
Was this episode underrunning at all? Because I did notice...
It's very short. When I put this on, I think the whole
final
thing's
episode is basically 17 minutes once you cut out all the...
Well, it's short, but the recaps at the beginning of each episode are long. Like, it's almost like they pick up from halfway through the
I've got to say, because I watch these on a laptop, I just use the mouse to scrub forward to where it
Well, I
left
started
off
fast-forwarding
usually,
a bit towards
But
it.
when I put it in, I think the whole running time was an hour and 26, and usually it's like 12 minutes longer than that. So.
They had some problems with the Leisure Hive being a bit short, didn't they, as well?
Yeah.
Not short enough for me.
Yeah. And yet somehow JNT stayed on as producer after.
Yeah.
Barry Letts just went, yeah, it's fine.
Just shove a Juliet Bravo advert on it and it'd be fine. Was that on in 1980? Juliet Bravo?
Probably starting around
Just about then, yeah.
Saturday night.
Okay, so overall, cautious thumbs up for Meglos? Yeah, it's all right.
It's got a load of faults, but I think it's fun.
Yeah.
Jolly.
It's all right. It's a bit nakedly anti-religion, and I say that as someone who's pretty nakedly anti-religion.
I was going to say, yeah.
But it's just
listeners, we can confirm.
But it's not done. But it's not done in a very clever way.
No,
it's not done in a nuanced way. It's just
sort of going, these idiots.
Yeah, which chimes for me, but it's not actually very satisfying dramatically.
No,
but it's still look, it's Tom Baker as a cactus. What more do you want?
Exactly.
And I do remember that sense, as well as the sense of total fear of knowing absolutely nothing about
science fiction.
Fiction.
Well, it was a very long way from the King's Head.
Well, it was.
I'd have to say. I mean, we were having audiences and humour and jokes about funeral directors, and then suddenly we were into the Tardis and a cactus.
Okay, so that about wraps it up for November. Thank you very much for listening.
How about if people want to get in touch with us, Matt?
Oh, well, funny you should mention that, Jim. If they wish to do so, well, the first thing they should do is leave us a review on iTunes, because that's how more people will discover this show, and that is a good thing.
Is it called Apple Podcasts now or something?
Oh, I thought you can say it's a show's called I'll Explain Later.
Yes.
Yeah. Apple Podcasts, yes, is where you should leave us a review. Thank you very much. But you can email us to hello@I'llExplainLater.com. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/I'llExplainLater, or we are on Twitter, twitter.com/ExplainLaterPod, or just @ExplainLaterPod, basically, on Twitter. That is how you can get in touch with us, and you should, because our mailbag has run empty.
And Christmas is coming.
Nothing
exactly. In the Christmas sack.
Yes, exactly. Santa would like to reach deep into his festive sack.
Bulging.
I'm going to say the turnaround on this is going to be much tighter than usual. We usually record episodes a couple of years ahead of when they actually go out, but this will be just a few days. So if you're really quick, if you're listening to this when it goes out, if you've got anything to say about Frontier in Space and Planet of the Daleks,
aka the Dalek War arc.
Yes, let us know by, the 25th of November we're recording?
Yes. Round about then, yes.
Yeah, and we'll be delighted to read your letters.
Yes, so if you've got any thoughts on the Dalek War arc, do send them in
because,
to take part in our
December special.
Christmas extravaganza. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed the rest of your November. For I'll Explain Later, I've been Matt Needer. I don't know why I've started doing this, but we may as well continue now, or are you just going to leave me hanging?
I'm John West.
We're just staring in disbelief.
Yeah, I don't know why I started doing that.
Jim,
who are you?
Jim Hall, or an evil cactus version of Jim Hall.
And I'm John West.
All right, we'll see you for Christmas. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ta-ra.
Philip Morris dug him up from the back of beyond. It's Barry Letts trying hard to make James Bond. He's feeding the world with a burrito of death. You'd better watch out for his sarcastic chef. Oh, Scaramanga. Oops, I was supposed to say salamander. Oh, salamander. Salamander.
Why are you biting your leg?
His eyes rolling back and forth.
He's been very patient during this record.
Why are you biting your leg?
When he's just cleaning himself.
Okay. Are you still recording this?
Yes, I'm still. I'm just waiting for...